Hello YouTube, Mr. Max here. Many Pokemon look exactly like the type they're assigned. However, some others don't quite look exactly like the type they're given, and some of those maybe even can argue should be a different type entirely. So today, I thought it would be fun to create teams of Pokemon that look like they could be other types. So let's get into the criteria for how I develop these teams. First, these are Pokemon that are chosen based on ones that have design elements, movesets, or associations with specific trainers that can have them be confused for a different type. So if they have if they're based on an animal or have some kind of design element where a lot of different other Pokemon sharing those elements are other types, that'll be taken into consideration. Let's say they learn a lot of fighting type moves in their level up move set, but aren't actually fighting types. That might be considered. And the best example for the last one is there are, like for example, a lot of dragon type trainers who don't use full teams of dragon types, but instead use some Pokemon that they're not dragon, but they still kind of fit the vibe of dragon. All Pokemon are fair game. I'm talking legendaries, mythicals, starters, mega evolutions, everybody. These teams I'm creating are not intended to be any kind of in-game team. They're all completely theoretical. They don't have to be balanced or anything. Um, I wasn't gonna say a Pokemon shouldn't be on the list simply because it is a legendary. I went through the entire Pokedex, and if I saw a Pokemon that I think looks like it should be a different type, I considered it. That being said, some Pokemon may appear on multiple teams. There are a lot of ones that are especially single type Pokemon that I think could be argued to be multiple other secondary types. I'm not going to say it shouldn't appear on a different team just because I put it on one earlier. I think that'd be kind of unfair. Next, no Pokemon that have a form or Pokemon in their evolutionary family that is the type in question. Specifically, I looked at like mega evolutions. So, for example, in one of the flying type teams I created, I originally had Mega Altaria, but because it's the Mega Evolved form of regular Altaria, who is Dragon Flying, while Mega Altaria is a Dragon Fairy, I decided that might be a little boring since it Mega Evolves from a flying type. Clearly, those flying elements are still going to be there. I thought just to kind of force myself to be a little more creative than that. Similarly, with the other one, an example of that would be Drapion. Drapion is a poison and dark type who is heavily associated with Aaron, who is a poison specialist, but that's mainly because it evolves from Skorupi, who is a bug type. So I decide in any instance where a Pokemon is or has design elements of another type because it evolved from a Pokemon from that type, I wouldn't include those either. And I will bring up more obvious picks that are seemingly missing as we go. However, regional variants and paradox Pokemon were considered on a case-by-case basis. An example of regional variant where I didn't put Overquill in any of the water teams I created since it evolves from a Hisuian Quillfish, who is a regional variant of a water type. I just figured since I had so many other options, I didn't really need Overquill. It was considered, but I didn't ultimately use it. Very similar with Delibird, since it has a Paradox Pokemon that is a water type. I considered it briefly, but I ultimately didn't go with it just because I had other options that I thought were a little more creative. But if at any point, after I get done with a a type, if you can think of any Pokemon that should be there, I would love to hear them down below. I'm sure I missed, at least at least several or maybe even complete types that I didn't even mention throughout this video. So please leave down below any suggestions you have. I wouldn't, if possible, I wouldn't mind making another video like this in the future. Um so yeah, with all that out of the way, let's get right into the first group of teams. And those are all teams of Pokemon that look like they maybe could be water type, but aren't actually water. And how this is going to work is the team will all be, six Pokemon that don't look like that look like their type, but aren't actually that type. And I made the trainer name and the trainer icon, like I basically kind of based it off of how Game Freak would have named a trainer if they were that type. So, for example, um, the first one here is Finn the Fisherman. Fishermen typically only use water type Pokemon, but in this case, he's using Pokemon that aren't actually water types. And that'll be consistent throughout. So like the flying ones will be bird keepers and that kind of thing. Dragon will be dragon tamers. It'll make sense as we go. But right now we have Finn, the fisherman. First we have Stunfisk, literally based on a fish. You can only catch it in Gen 5 through fishing, maybe surfing as well, but definitely fishing. Regardless, you can't find it outside of the water. So it is a not water type. It is actually ground electric that is only found in water. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if people are constantly confused about it being a water type. Same thing with Pincurchin, but even more so. In Gen 8, it can only be found through fishing, yet it is a pure electric type. It is actually the first of many, many pure electric types throughout this entire video that are pure electric, yet look like they should be potentially several other types. I would argue, just looking at Pincurchin, I would think it should be like poison water. You find it by fishing. It's based on a sea urchin that are generally poisonous or venomous, which would I think poisonous. Yeah, whatever. You don't want to touch it. Um, uh, but no, it's not water or poison. It is instead just pure electric. You only find it through fishing, but it's not water. Well, okay. Dragonair, originally back in Generation 1, you only found Dratini and Dragonair through fishing, and because they have a more blue tone to them, I wouldn't be surprised if people assumed they were water. Dratini is more purpley depending on the picture you have of them. With Dragonair especially, because it is blue, because you can only find it in the water, I wouldn't be surprised if people, at least at some point, mistook it for a water type, especially since there's at least a fan theory that it originally was intended to evolve into Gyarados. I don't necessarily agree with that theory, but the design elements I could kind of hear an argument for that making sense. Whereas Dragon Knight, very much so, that is a dragon flying type. I'm not taking that away from it. Um, that so yeah, in instances where a previous evolution fits the type more, I'll usually go with the previous form. In this case, I think Dragonair would fit the type the best. Armaldo and Cradilly. They are both fossil Pokemon that I think could be argued have design elements that could lend them well to being water type. First of all, it wouldn't be the first time that a fossil pairing was rock water. We had Omastar and Kabutops in Generation 1 that were both rock water. And Armaldo especially has very similar design elements to Kabutops. They both have those, scythe arm things. Their heads are very similarly shaped. They just have a lot of design elements that I think, if I don't really know why Armaldo is part bug and Kabutops isn't. Like if you switch their typings, I don't really think much would change. Um, and then both Armaldo and Cradilly are both based on ancient water-dwelling things. Armaldo was some water bug creature, and Cradilly is some ancient water lily, water plant thing. Um, I almost guarantee if, as of Gen 3, if it weren't a trend to have all fossils be part rock, Cradilly would have been grass water. But they were still on the trend of them all being part rock, so I'm okay with it being grass. I just feel like it if the timeline were slightly different, one or both of them easily could have been water type, especially since Armaldo literally learned Watery Gun by level up. I just feel like not many Pokemon learn that move if they're not water. And then Dhelmise is another one just like Pincurchin that could be one of like four different types. At least this one is a dual type. And given what I know about the Pokemon, I can more or less make sense of it being grass, grass ghost. But if I was just looking at it, I would probably think it's at least steel, probably water, especially if you primed the person thinking that, or primed them by telling them that it could only be found by fishing. Like, yes, it's covered in that seaweed or algae or whatever, but um, uh, just design wise, I wouldn't immediately think ghost or grass. I would personally think water steel. Uh, like I said, especially since in Generation 7 you could only find it through fishing. So yeah, I think it makes sense kind of as a theoretical boss of his team for that to be Dhelmise. Next we have Pacifica, who is a swimmer that again trains not water types. And these are all Pokemon who have animal inspiration that probably could easily lend themselves to being water types. We have Ice who is a penguin, and we know from Piplup that, and also Iron Bundle that penguin Pokemon, can or maybe should be water type. Ice is pure ice, and I think that works for it, especially with its whole gimmick. But I don't know. I think it being water wouldn't be out of place there. Bellybolt is another pure electric type that I genuinely think would have benefited from the water typing. There's a lot of other frog Pokemon that are water type, and I don't know. I just feel like there are so many pure electric type Pokemon, and a good amount of them probably should be other types. We'll hit on several of them throughout, but Bellibolt is definitely one of them where, I don't know, I feel like just water fits this Pokemon's vibe very well, and I feel it's a little weird that it's just pure electric. Malamar is Psychic Dark, but it is based on a squid, octopus, jelly, or a cuttlefish thing. So I wouldn't be surprised if just looking at it, someone might think it were like dark water. Um, I know that it has like a whole theme of using hypnosis and mind control and that kind of thing, which emphasizes its psychic typing. But given its design inspiration, I could easily see it going water as well. Electros, another pure electric type that is, that looks like it maybe should be another type. In this specific instance, I do think Electros makes complete sense to be pure electric since it has a levitate ability, giving it functionally no weaknesses. So having that water type would actually make it worse. So just for its gimmick, I understand that. But I don't know, just it being an electric eel, and I think it might be the only electric eel Pokemon. Don't quote me on that. It's the only electric eel Pokemon I can think of. Um, I don't know. I feel like that it could, especially with this mega evolution. I don't know if it like again, I don't know if it should have gained another type, but it would have been cool for them to, you know, to add another type of assuming it doesn't keep levitate when it mega evolves. They could keep that same type with like how Scizor kept Technician, but you know, I I feel like an extra type could have helped that Pokemon stand out a little more. Graplocked, literally based on an octopus, and the first time you find it in Generation 8, you're swimming along the water route and it just like swims super fast at you, yet somehow is not a water type. It is one of the many pure fighting types in that generation that look like they should be another type. There's all three of them are going to show up a couple of times throughout this presentation. But Graplocked is definitely the first one here. And again, I'm not saying that every single blue Pokemon should be water, but the fact that you find it originally in the ocean swimming at you, it is pure, it is this blue coloring. The first time I was, approached by by one, it caught me. and then I had my Rillaboom use drum beating on it. I was confused as to why it wasn't super effective. And then after I caught it, I was equally confused about why it was pure fighting. So yeah, I feel like another water fighting type wouldn't have been out of place here. Nihilego. Now, I understand that the Ultra Beasts are supposed to be weird. They're not really supposed to make sense. There will be a couple of them throughout this presentation, but I'm okay with Nihilego being rock poison. However, I don't really know why it's part rock. I like that it at least had a unique typing at the time, but also just looking at it, I would never have assumed it were rock poison. Sure, there are other jellyfish Pokemon that are poison type, like Tentacool, but I would definitely think water, since it is a jellyfish. I would maybe even think ghost has like a ghostly vibe to it. Or maybe even think ice, the kind of lighter bluish white with those like looks like snowflakes around his head. But no, it's rock type. Um, but yeah, like I said, I'm okay with it being this strange typing because Ultra Beasts are supposed to be strange, but just looking at it, I wouldn't think rock. I would definitely assume water over that type. Last we have Taylor the Sailor. First we have Crabrawler, another pure fighting type that arguably probably should be water. There's a lot of other crab Pokemon that are water type, and I think it'll be a lot of fun if this uh fighting water crab Pokemon evolved into a fighting ice type. I don't know. I think something fun about the ice part of it like freezes when it evolves. I think that's kind of cool. Hippowdon and Crocodile, they're the first ones on this presentation so far that I genuinely think shouldn't be the type I'm talking about, but they're based on animals that are at least semi-aquatic. So just, based on what they are based on, I think it's kind of fun to include them with their ground types, and that's kind of literally the opposite of them being their inspirations being water. So I think that's fun. Um, like I said, they shouldn't literally be water types, but they're inspired by at least semi-aquatic creatures. So I think they fit the vibe, especially of the rest of this team here. Whereas the Titan, it is based on a whale who is, typically completely aquatic, and I know it is a land whale. Um, but unlike with Ice Cube, I genuinely do think the Titan could have benefited from an extra type, especially with water. There's just a lot of pure ice types that, by the time you get to Titan, since there are so many pure ice types, they just kind of get a little monotonous. And I genuinely feel like Titan could have benefited from that extra water typing. It learns a lot of water moves. Like I said, it is based on a whale, and a lot of other whale Pokemon are water types. So, like, I'm fine with just like in a vacuum, I'm okay with it being pure ice. But you'll even see a couple of other pure ice types on this list that maybe should be other types. And I think, uh, especially between Titan, Hippowdon, Crocodile, Titan is the one that I think most deserves to be actually water type. Gudra, I think genuinely also deserves to be water type, because it is the only pseudo legendary that is a single type Pokemon, at least as far as the final stage goes. It is a pure dragon type, despite Sliggoo having to evolve while it is raining in the overworld. It's not just you use Rain Dance in a battle. It has to literally be actively raining in the overworld. It When it evolves, it learns the move Aqua Tail, which not a lot of non-water types learn that. Dragonair also learns, which helps my argument there also. I just feel like everything was converging for Gudra to be water, and the set is just pure dragon. I don't really understand why, but whatever. At least they kind of fixed it by making Hisui and Gudra part steel, but I would have liked it to be part water. Oh well. Now, Lugia. Lugia is possibly one of the, if not the single most baffling type decisions throughout the entire franchise. Lugia, literally the guardian of the sea, is found in the middle of the ocean at the bottom of the Whirl Islands behind a big waterfall. It learns a good amount of water moves, yet it is psychic flying. I don't know why. I think it would have been kind of cool for Ho-Oh and Lugia to have this a same secondary typing as the box legends from Red and Blue. If to kind of parallel Charizard and Blastoise to have Ho-Oh be fire and Lugia be water. Maybe the argument was they didn't want the box legendaries to have any kind of like significant advantage against each other. But then literally one generation later, they have Kyogre and Groudon, where even if somehow Groudon gets his son up first, Kyogre is still at a massive advantage. I think you could have started that one gen earlier, but I don't know. I'll never understand that. I'm sure there is some kind of reason for why they made Lugia not water, but it, I think it really should have been water type. Next up, the not flying teams. First, we have Adrian, who is a bird keeper who has a bunch of avian Pokemon. However, these birds are not flying type. Um, I started him with three different starter Pokemon that are all birds but aren't actually flying type: Empoleon, Blaziken, Quaquaval. Now, originally, I had Decidueye here instead of Quaquaval. However, in iterating on these lists, I did eventually decide on the idea where Pokemon that evolve from other types shouldn't be on these lists. Same thing happened with Dragalge. I had Dragalge on the one of the water teams since it evolves from Skrelp, who was already water type and had so many other options, I left it off. And since there was one other starter Pokemon that is a bird but isn't a flying type, I decided to leave both forms of Decidueye off and put Quaquaval here instead. It would have been cool to have a fire, grass, water type. Would have been even cooler to have a fire, grass, water type that are all fighting types that maybe should be flying. But regardless, Empoleon, Blaziken, and Quaquaval definitely fit the bill here. Probably their first stages would have fit even better, but I like Blaziken quite a bit. And I think it would be kind of awkward to have um, one that's fully evolved, but not the others. But regardless, uh, it's yeah, I would that's why I went with these three. And then three other bird Pokemon that are not flying type. Espathra, a pure psychic roadrunner peacock thing. That's just pure psychic. Okay, sure, whatever. There are other flightless birds like Dodrio that are part flying, but sure, Espathra can be pure psychic. Surfetched, this one is one of the exceptions to the whole regional variant rule, where unlike Overquill, where I left it off because I had so many other options, Sirfetch'd actually was kind of the inspiration for this entire presentation, since I genuinely believe that Sirfetch'd, who is a pure fighting type for some reason, I genuinely believe that it could be one of like three or four different other types. I thought it would be kind of dumb to leave it off of here just because it evolves from a Pokemon that is a regional variant of a flying type. Especially since I genuinely believe that Galarian Farfetch'd should be fighting flying. It's bizarre to me that is pure fighting. So there we go. Now, Pheasantipity, this one is wild to me because when they first revealed the Loyal Three, they revealed their designs first, and then we got their types later. I feel like I remember every single person theory crafting the types of all three of them. Every single person had, okay, so it's flying and a something. Some people got it right with poison. They're like all three are poison, and maybe something else, or like they like kind of went off the like pink elements and like either psychic or poison or something like that. But they were all like that is definitely flying type. And they were wrong. For some reason, for some reason, Pheasantipity is fairy type. And I don't know, something about like I don't really get fairy vibes from it, especially since you fight it when it is like flying around. I understand that there's a lot of Pokemon that can fly that aren't actually flying type, but a lot of those do have the levitate ability, whereas Pheasantipity does not. So I don't know. I'm okay to an extent with bird Pokemon not having to be flying type, but just everything about Pheasantipity screams flying to me. And it's a little weird that it's not, especially when fairy doesn't really pop out to me in its design. So there you go. And next, we have one other not flying team. We have Skylar. First, we have Flapple. Fun fact, Flapple and actually Drampa, both of them are two of the very few Pokemon that can learn Fly by level up. And then they're both a part of an even smaller group that can learn Fly by level up, but are not flying types. Another one being Vikavolt. Flapple, I completely understand why it's dragon. I really like the pun of it being a worm, which if it's spelled differently is like a type of dragon or like similar to a dragon in mythology. It's a worm in an apple. That's really fun. But if you're just looking at it, just looking at its motions and like it wouldn't necessarily scream a dragon to you. And I could, especially since it does learn fly by level up, despite clearly not being able to carry the player. I know by the time Gen 8 rolled around, Fly didn't really work like that, but it's still like, historically, the move Fly implies that it should be able to, carry the player. Regardless, I feel like I don't really know why Flapple learned Fly by level up, and there's a lot of other Pokemon that I feel deserve it more. But because it does learn that move specifically, people might assume it's flying type, but it's Dragon Grass. So Venomoth, it's another one that, literally flies around, but is not a dragon. No, sorry, it's not dragon. It's not a flying type. Um, I would not be surprised if anyone who was playing the original Red and Blue saw Venomoth and just assumed it would be weak to electric or assumed that ground wouldn't work on it. And then it turns out, it's actually, not flying. And then they would assume it's psychic type since it's heavily associated with Sabrina, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Um, but I could definitely see someone assume that Venomoth were a flying type, especially since it even kind of looks like Butterfree, who they know is a flying type. And then, similar to Flapple with Drampa, um, Drampa can learn fly by level up. It has like this like cloudy aesthetic to it, which again, kind of like Altaria implies flying type to me. I'm okay with it being normal. I do like it for its vibe wise. I feel like that works well for it. Um, but yeah, I could very easily also see flying for it. Now, Flygon, um, fly is literally in its name. It's almost as if they decided super late in development to not make it a flying type, but they were so dead set on it being flying that they gave it a levitate ability to kind of compensate for that. There's even a theory that the name Flygon was supposed to be attached to what is now Salamence because you have Bagon, Shelgon, Salamence. It would have made more sense since Bagon's aspiration is to eventually grow wings and fly. It would have been kind of cool if Bagon eventually turns into Flygon. But they made Flygon this guy instead. Plus, I think Salamence is a cooler name and fits that Pokemon better. Um, but it now kind of leaves Flygon here a little awkward since it isn't actually a flying type. It's also not a bug type, which a lot of people really, really want Flygon to be dragon bug, but I almost guarantee that if it ever does happen where Flygon gets a mega, it won't be bug. Just don't never get your hopes up for that. Um, Now Latios, nothing about Latios specifically screams dragon to me. Like it's literally based on a jet plane and jets fly around, so I feel like it being flying type wouldn't be out of the question. They gave it levitate, I think for a similar reason they gave Flygon levitate. Maybe at some point early in development, it was a flying type, but they decided to make the pairing of Latios and Latias both dragon instead, but still they wanted them to fly around, so they gave them both levitate. Um, yeah, I could have put both Latios and Latias here, but in any instance where like a pairing of Pokemon both fit, I'll just put one and comment on both. And then Tapu Koko. I another one where I completely understand why it is the type that it is. They wanted all three of the island guardians to be fairy type and then a type associated with a certain terrain. But the first thing you see Tapu Koko do in the game is fly in the sky, electrify all of those Spearows, and then, fly down to you. Plus, it's literally based on a Thunderbird. It's based on, the top totem, kind of like Xatu, the top of the totem pole. That's literally based on that like is carved out to look like a bird. It learns Brave Bird, I think a couple of other flying type moves, but no, it's electric type. Okay, next up, ones that are, maybe look like they should be fighting type but aren't. First, we have Donnie, Donnie the martial artist. We have Pinsir, who is at this point now a counterpart to Heracross that leads even, to even more confusion because even back in Generation 1, people genuinely thought it was part fighting since it learned all the fighting moves it could by level up in H or not all of them, but it definitely learned seismic toss by level up. It learned submission by TM, and that got even worse in Gen 3 when it learned, I know it learned Vital Throw and Revenge, and then it's not actually a fighting type, so I think it maybe deserves to be a fighting type. We have Staraptor, especially by Gen 4 when every single first root bird was flying normal. I think it would have really benefited Staraptor to gain a different secondary type. It learns close combat as its evolution move. I think it would have been cool for it to become a flying fighting type. But Staraptor is cool. It makes good use out of Double Edge with its reckless ability. So it's not the worst thing in the world for it to be the type that it is, but just to help it be a little more unique, it would have been cool to be the first flying fighting type, I'm pretty sure. Darmanitan, it learns, I know for a fact it learns Hammer Arm and Superpower by level up, which could lead people to think that it could be a fighting type. There's a lot of other monkey-based Pokemon that are fighting type, Primeape, Infernape, etc. And also, it could have been kind of cool to have Darmanitan be a fire fighting type, with Darmanitan's standard form being the more aggressive physical type one. And then when it turns into its Zen mode, it transforms into the more relaxed, special based psychic type one. I think that could have been cool. Rampardos. Rampardos is the only pure rock fossil Pokemon. Um, which has always been weird to me because I have always been under the impression that the reason why fossils are rock is not because the Pokemon itself has always been rock, it's because like the revival process isn't perfect and it'll like leave some of the fossil essence in it, so, like that has to keep it part rock. So is that implying that Rampardos had always been part rock? Was it a normal type and the rock kind of superseded that? I'm not really sure, but regardless, I feel like it really should be a secondary type, and I think fighting works very well for it. It kind of um, even more so enhances the parallel it has with Bastiodon, where Bastiodon is this massively super defensive Pokemon who is rock steel type, whereas Rampardos is this all-out attacker who is a rock fighting type. Plus, it would have been kind of cool for them both to have a secondary type that's good into the other's um, primary type. Fighting is good into steel and rock, whereas steel is good into rock. Currently, Bastiodon just have a full advantage, but as far as like types are concerned, I think it would have been kind of cool if Rampardos were able to kind of even the playing field that way. Electivire is one that I left on here more so just because it would feel weird not to. There's almost every single Pokemon fan game you play that has Electivire in it. Almost all of them will make them a fighting type, and I don't really disagree with that. Um, with those big arms, they made him a fight. They made him a physical attacker. He's been able to learn low kick by level up for a while now. I think it makes perfect sense to make him a fighting type. Um, of the electric types so far, he's probably the one I feel the least strong about making a secondary type, but I still agree that it would help him stand out a little more if he were a secondary type, especially since we didn't get any fighting electric types all the way until Generation 9. So this would have been a good place to start that. And then Melmetal, I think Melmetal could very easily benefit from having something else going on with it. Pure Steel is good, but I don't know, it's not for a mythical Pokemon like this. Um, I think a secondary type could help it stand out. And since it already has the Iron Fist ability and learns a bunch of other punching moves, I think you lean into that and make it a fighting type. It'd be cool to get Stab and also Iron Fist boost from stuff like Drain Punch and Dynamic Punch, maybe even give it Mach Punch. I think that could be a lot of fun. Um, yeah, I also don't feel like the absolute strongest about that, but also, since you do have to go through all of this effort in Pokemon Go to get this thing, I think having it be more than just a pure steel type could benefit it. Next up, we have Rhonda, another fighting girl here. And I decided to kind of theme her team around animal-based Pokemon that all look like they probably could or should be fighting types. First, we have Obstagoon. Now, I like Galarian, Zigzagoon, and Linoon being dark normal, but especially since Alolan Raticate was already normal dark. I think it would have been cool if when you got to Obstagoon, it became part fighting, so dark fighting. I appreciate that they leaned into it, having the guts abilities that get stab, guts boosted facade. That's really cool, but also it does learn a lot of moves. I know it learns cross chop and counter by level up, and both of those are fighting moves. So I think that alone kind of made me thinking, started me thinking that it maybe could or should be a fighting type. So I think it just to not only to differentiate it from a different regional variant that already existed, also, just kind of lean into the moves that it already learns. Lycanroc Dusk form specifically. I almost put Midnight form here, but I actually found a different place for him later. And because there is at least one other Lycanroc form that I think could also work with fighting, I decided to put Lycanroc Dusk form here. Um, as you'll see later, I think it would be kind of cool if all three Lycanrocs had a different type. And I think Lycanroc Dust form fits the fighting type fine enough. Vigoroth is fun because I think it would be very clever to have Vigoroth being this, super aggressive middle form be either normal fighting or just pure fighting. And then when it evolves into slacking to become, much more laid back, it actually loses the fighting type and goes back to being pure normal. Especially since Vigoroth learned stuff like Focus Punch, Counter, and Reversal after the level where when it evolved into Slacking, and Slacking can't. I think you can learn Counter, but it can't learn Reversal or Focus Punch. I think that kind of, that kind of leads me to think that they at least at one point were considering making Vigoroth a fighting type. But I don't know, maybe I don't think a Pokemon has ever lost the fighting type specifically when it evolves or mega evolves or whatever, but I think this would have been a good time to try something like that. Beartic is another pure ice type that I think genuinely would benefit from a secondary type, and fighting would fit right in with it. It definitely, I know it learns, I think it's superpower by level up in Gen 5. Um, but also it would just help differentiate it from the other pure ice types that are in the region. If I'm not mistaken, outside of legendaries, I think there's only three new ice types introduced in that region, and they're all pure ice type. I know it's the only physical attacker of that group, but I still think it would have been beneficial to it to have a secondary type. Incineroar, it's kind of a miracle that it's not part fighting, considering it's based on a wrestler and looks like that learns a bunch of fighting moves. There is a trend of other fire type starter Pokemon becoming part fighting. It had been a couple of generations since the last one. At least, there's been a gap of one. We had Imbor and then Delphox, who was not a fighting type. And then when we got the leak for Incineroar, everyone was like, oh no, we're getting another fire fighting type. And instead it's part dark. But in hindsight, I don't like I like that it's part dark, but at the same time, everything about this Pokemon indicates that it probably should have been fighting type. But I like Incineroar for what it is, but you know, if if there hadn't been three other firefighting type starter Pokemon, I almost guarantee they would have made it part fighting. Now, Zeraora. This is definitely the pure electric type that I've mentioned so far that I am the most disappointed in the fact that it is pure electric type. As previously mentioned with Melmetal, I think mythical Pokemon, um, because they're event exclusive, because they have this status to them, I genuinely think the vast majority of them probably should have a secondary type unless there's some kind of lore reason why they don't. Um, and Zeraora is just like they don't all have to have a secondary type, but Zeraora specifically needed to have a secondary type in order to, in my opinion, matter. Because it just being a pure electric type when there's already been so many other pure electric types that serve a similar function, and not to mention a lot of the other pure electric types probably should be other types as well. Um, it would have really helped it stand out, but instead it's just pure electric. I really think fighting would benefit it. It's another Pokemon that learns a good amount of fighting moves. All of its Pokedex entries mention about how it yearns for battle. It really good at close up hand-to-hand combat, and then it's just pure electric. And I really don't know why. Its signature move is called Plasma Fist. Like it just feels like it was teed up perfectly to be the first electric fighting type. Instead, it's not. It's just pure electric. Even electric dark, I think, would have helped, differentiate it a little bit. Again, it would have been the first one of those also, but nope, another kind of boring pure electric type. Next up, not dragon. I have two of these as well. We have Danny, the dragon tamer, kind of a reference to Daenerys from Game of Thrones. And I wanted all of her Pokemon to be flying types that are that have draconic elements, but because I decided against Charizard since it has a mega form that is part dragon, uh, I couldn't uh, I couldn't come up with six different Pokemon that are flying that look draconic, but I think the Pokemon I picked here are, they do fit her vibe well. So Gyarados, it is one that I am genuinely shocked that its Mega wasn't Dragon. It changed types into a Dark type, which has always been a little weird, but I guess for balancing reasons, they didn't want it to be Dragon. They wanted to be a different type this week to Fairy. Okay. Um, but yeah, it is probably one of the single most mistyped Pokemon throughout the entire franchise. It shows up on both Lance and Claire's teams in various games. Um, it just looks like a dragon type, is heavily associated with the move Dragon Rage. It just feels like it should be dragon. And if it were released even like one or two gens later, it almost certainly would have been dragon. But because they wanted that type to be special to Dragonite, it was stuck with the flying type instead for some reason. So there you go. Lapras is one of those Pokemon that definitely has a draconic vibe to it, to the point where it was on Iris's team in Black and White 2. It learned Dragon Dance and a couple of other dragon moves. So yeah, I think it deserves to be here. Tropius, it is the only other Pokemon to my knowledge that learned Dragon Hammer outside of Alolan Exeggutor. I think it would have been cool if it were the first Dragon Grass type. I think it's a Pokemon that kind of would have benefited from having something, something to it. Um, it's one of those Pokemon from Gen 3 that look really cool, but has a base stat total that leaves a lot to be desired. But if it were part dragon, I think that would at least help it stand out a little bit. Aerodactyl and Archeops are both fossil Pokemon that are heavily associated with dragon type trainers. Aerodactyl has been on several of Lance's teams. Archeops is on Iris's team. They both learn a good amount of dragon moves. I think they both fit in very well vibe-wise. And then Lugia, I already went on a rant about how it probably should be water, but also dragon fits his vibe just as well. So there you go. And next up, we have Dante, the other dragon tamer. And his team is full of Pokemon that are leaning more into they are definitely not dragon, but they wouldn't feel out of place on a dragon specialist's team in the same way that that like Aerodactyl and Lapras did. So Slitherwing, um, another instance where they easily could have made a unique typing, but just decided to make it a weird typing instead. It's fighting bug, um, especially when it's like standing up and just everything about it for to me screams dragon. Like its tail looks like a dragon's tail. We've already had a couple of other good uh, fighting bug types. This could have been the first dragon bug, but no, fighting, because fighting was just the type that the past Paradox Pokemons are apparently. So there you go. So Lazzle, another like kind of lizard Pokemon that if it were on a Dragon Specialist team, I wouldn't really feel out of place. It learns a couple of dragon moves. I know it learns Dragon Pulse, so it wouldn't be out of place. It's not like uh, wouldn't be my first choice, but it definitely wouldn't, I don't think anyone would like complain about it. Same thing with Scrafty. It also learns a good amount of dragon moves, it learns Dragon Dance, and just its overall vibe could also, work on a dragon team. Rampardos, along with fighting, I think Dragon could also work here. It has a similar build to Tyrantrum, who was a fossil from a couple of gens later, who is part dragon. So I think it works there. And then Aggron and Tyranitar are both, you know, kind of like kaiju-esque Pokemon. Aggron was actually on um, Iris's team in Black and White 2, and Tyranitar almost definitely should have been on Lance's team in Gold and Silver. But yeah, both of them would not feel out of place next to other like real dragons. Next up, we have ones that are not steel type. I have two here as well. First, we have Fernando. Ignore for a second that it's Wickstrom. There were no other character models that are in suits of armor like this, so I just picked the one that they do have. But I wanted there to be one of the two. I wanted one to have a name that started with FE, which is the periodic symbol for iron, and give it a more like, knight sounding name. So Fernando with this, with this knight character here. And his theming is I wanted him to have all Pokemon that kind of look like they have a suit of armor on, but are not steel type. Phalanx is the next of the three Gen 8 Pokemon that are somehow pure fighting type, yet really look like they should be one of many other types. Um, the first time I found Phalanx, just like with Graplocked, I used a fire move on it and it wasn't super effective. Like what? Um, what? It's segmented like a caterpillar. So I thought it might be pure. I thought that it might be part bug. It literally looks like it has like armored shield plating on. So I thought it was part steel. So then, like after I hit it with a fire move and that wasn't super effective, I caught it, and to my surprise, it's another pure fighting type. That's weird to me. I'm okay with it being part fighting, but how is it not at least fighting steel? We haven't had too many of those. I think that would have been pretty cool. There wasn't a fighting steel type box legend actually in that game, but considering there were that box legend is pure fighting sometimes, and also there were two other pure fight, at least I could think of at least two other pure fighting types in the region. I think you get away with this one being part steel. Mega Slowbro might be a little bit of a stretch, and I completely understand if you disagree with me on that. But considering its entire body is now, fully coated in that shell armor, I think it would be kind of cool if for no other reason than just to differentiate it from Slow King and from regular Slowbro, for it to now be part steel. Either Psychic Steel or Water Steel. Either way, I'm not really too picky about that. But especially since some people kind of say that Mega Slowbro is kind of worse than regular Slowbro anyway. It can't hold an item. It no longer has the regenerator ability. Shell armor, I'm pretty sure it has shell armor. It's a good ability. Like it's cool that it can't be hit by critical hits, but when you don't have the amount of sustain that regular Slowbro does, and you can't hold an assault vest or leftovers, there there isn't really a great reason to mega evolve it. But if it were part steel, that could at least help entice you. Golurk, I like that it's ghost ground, but also just looking at that thing, I could very easily see someone confusing it for a steel type, especially knowing that it can like kind of transform itself into like different things. Like its feet can go up into its body and like literally take off. It can learn fly for some reason. Um, there's a mission in one of the Pokepark games where it's like transformed to look like a cannon. So clearly it's like mechanized in some capacity, but I guess you could argue, oh, that's just the ghost inside of it doing that. But yeah, I think it being steel type could also work. Surfetch'd is here once again. I think just like with fighting flying, fighting steel could, or even flying steel could also work very well. It's, holding a sword, it's holding a shield. It can learn like not a bunch of steel moves, but it can learn iron defense and maybe one or two other moves. So I think steel could work with it. Chestnut, to me, nothing about Chestnut specifically screams fighting type to me. Um, but because it does have that armor on, I think steel could work very well with it. Almost every single Chestnut you find on randomized Pokemon Showdown uh, gives it the steel Terra type. So clearly, other people can kind of think that steel would benefit this Pokemon. And then, same thing with Komao. I like that it's fighting dragon. There aren't a lot of fighting dragons, especially since this was the first one to do it. I think the only other one was Koraidon, and I would kind of argue, as you'll see later, that Koraidon maybe shouldn't be fighting either. But because it does have that, that scale plating, it literally is said to shake its tail like a bell to scare off enemies. Like that that rings dragon to well, yeah, dragon, but also steel to me. But fighting is cool, but I think steel could have also been a very appropriate type for it. Next, we have Galvan, since to galvanize something is to coat it in a layer of iron or other metal. And, I feel like that's the kind of similar pun that a Game Freak would do. They just take like a regular name and kind of like add a pun to it. Instead of Gavin, you have Galvin. So we have Delmise here once again. Like I said before, um, it could be one of like four different types. At least with Delmise, it does have an ability that basically gives it steel stab. So they realized in development that it should be a steel type, but so it's kind of fun that it basically has three different stab typings. That's cool, but it probably should have just been a steel type in the first place. Dreadnought is a bit of a stretch, and I will admit that. These next two kind of are, but Dreadnought, um, when it was first announced, I was convinced that it was going to be a water steel type. Um, its name is reminiscent of a dreadnought, which is a kind of ship, and ships are typically made of metal. Um, Nothing about its shell really like screamed rock to me. It kind of even looked more like oxidized metal, at least to me at the time. Um, and also just like its mouth kind of looked like a bear trap almost. There's a lot about it that really screamed steel type to me. And going off of its jaw, I think it would have been kind of cool if its signature move, jaw lock, uh, were instead of it being a dark move, it were instead a steel move. It would have given a lot of Pokemon just, if it were distributed more, would have given a lot of Pokemon more steel coverage options. If they don't want to run Iron Head, maybe they're too slow to really use it, they can instead have Jaw Lock, like Steelix, I think could benefit from something like that. So yeah, instead it's another dark 80 based power move that like, why would you run this over Crunch? But, whatever. I just think, especially since the only other water steel type is Empoleon, I think Dreadnought would have been a very good candidate for that. But maybe because you find it so early in the game, they thought water steel would be a little too overpowered for that point. But oh well. Behem, Behem is here mostly just to try and differentiate it from all of the other uh pure psychic types in Unova. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think there are at least three different other pure psychic type lines in the region. So Behem makes four different pure psychic type lines. A couple of them could also benefit from other types. But Behem, I think it would have been kind of cool if they leaned more into it, you know, into its like UFO inspiration and making it a steel type. I don't know, again, just to kind of help give it something that's unique to it, because as of right now, it's just kind of a worse Reuniclus. There's not really anything that lets it stand out from the rest of the psychic pack to the point where it isn't even on um uh Caitlin's Elite Four team. So you kind of I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people even forget that it's a Pokemon, or at least forget that it's from Gen 5. And this is the last time we'll see Rampardos here, but I do genuinely think that because it is a single type Pokemon, it could be one of multiple different types. And because of its spikes, because of just its association with Bastiodon, I think Steel also works very well with it. Um, Steel is a very good offensive type, as almost as good as it is defensive. So I think it's kind of cool. It would be kind of cool to see both ways that steel can be used. Plus, it wouldn't be the first time, as mentioned before, that we would have had a fossil pairing that's the same type. Kabutops and Omastar are both rock water. why couldn't Rampardos and Bastion both be rock steel? Iron Hands. Iron Hands is the one Paradox Pokemon that I still to this day every now and then kind of forget what type it is. Like I know in my soul that it is fighting electric. I like that it's fighting electric. It kind of takes this thunder a little bit away that Palmont is also electric fighting in the same gen, but you know, fighting electric fits this Pokemon very well. However, of all of the future Paradox Pokemon, I personally feel like this is the one in its base form, not shiny because they all look steel type and they're shiny. This is the one in its main form that looks like it probably actually should be a steel type. But maybe that's just me, but I don't know, just to me, it looks like it maybe should be a steel type. That's again, that just might just be me. And the Mega Blastoise. This one has always baffled me because from all the way back in Generation 1, Venusaur and Charizard were both dual types. And I get that at the time there wasn't really a great secondary type for Blastoise, but then all those years later, you have a chance to give its Mega form a new type. Blastoise has been able to learn Flash Cannon since Generation 4. It seems like a natural progression to give it a secondary type now that it can Mega Evolve. They even gave Charizard two different Mega Evolutions. One of them got us a different secondary type, and then Blastoise just got nothing. It gained this giant, cannon and the two smaller arm cannons that are made of metal, and they just kept it pure water. I think it really would have benefited from gaining that secondary steel typing, but what are you gonna do? Next up, not grass. I only have one team here. The first two I feel are kind of self-explanatory. Florges and Comfey, they're both pure fairy types that are heavily associated with collecting plants and literally making it like part of their being. Florges, the first two ones in its form where it clearly is like holding onto the flower, those I can more or less understand being pure fairy. Within Florges, literally like is clearly been, completely uh fused with the flower. Why are you not part grass? I don't know. Same with Comfey, like you like collecting these flowers to make a lei, and I guess it's one of those things where the Pokemon itself is the little head there, but it learns so many grass moves and has abilities that really only work with other grass Pokemon. Like I think it was I personally feel like Comfey was their chance to basically make Florges again as a grass fairy type, and instead they just literally did Florges again with it being pure fairy. That feels a little weird to me. Um, Pseudo Widow is an obvious one that I like that it's not part grass, but it would be a little weird if I left it off this list. It's literally designed to actually look like wood, but it's not. So yeah, I had to put it here. And here's Surfetch one more time. This is the last time we'll see him. But in the same way that his sword and shield make him look like he maybe could be a steel type, I think they even more so make him look like he probably should be a grass type. A giant leak sword and a leaf shield. You can learn leaf blade by level up. I think it just makes sense for that to become a grass type. But no, three other types make sense, but instead pure fighting. Oh well. Passimian, another one that is of a in a like a counterpart where the other one has a secondary type and he doesn't. Oranguru is normal psychic, and then Passimian is just pure fighting. Another pure fighting type that should be at least some other secondary type, either fighting normal to go with Oranguru's normal psychic. It could be dark type because of its coloration. But I think grass makes the most sense. It's literally holding a melon as its little rugby ball. It has like a little, what looks like a melon helmet. It has little grass, like leaf accents on it. Like everything design-wise to me is pointing to it being part grass, but instead, pure fighting. Oh, okay, whatever. And then Celesteela. All of his Pokedex entries say that it's uh it looks like it is designed to be, or it's like its structure is that similar to bamboo. It learns a bunch of grass moves by level up in HM, or TM rather. I kind of understand how it became flying steel, especially since it is a Ultra Beast, and like I said before, Ultra Beasts aren't really supposed to make sense, but just since it's literally designed after bamboo, it learns a bunch of grass moves. I don't know. I think also I think it is a parallel to can't think of his name right now. The grass steel one in I think they're both version exclusive. So if they were both grass steel, I think that could have been cool as well. Similar to Pheromosa and Buzzwole, how they're both fighting bug. Moving on from Moses, the grass guy, we have one that is not rock. We have Harding, the hiker, and we have Houndstone, Mega Sableye, and Spiritomb, who are all ghost types who probably should be part rock but aren't. Cursula also maybe could have gone here, but because Cursula evolves from Corsola, who is sorry, Galarian Corsola, who was a regional variant of a rock type, I decided to leave it off here since I had other options. But just know that there were at least four different ghost types that probably should be part rock, but instead none of them are. We don't have a single rock ghost type. Houndstone literally has a gravestone sticking out of its head. Not part, not part rock. Okay, stone is in your name, whatever. Um, Even regular Sableye, I think, could work very well as a ghost rock type. And I kind of understand why they gave him the dark type because it is a super early game, kind of weak Pokemon that its gimmick is that it has no weaknesses in Generation 3. Um, and that's cool. Like it actually gives this kind of weak little guy some kind of utility, at least for a decent portion of the game, to to give you options against stuff that your team might have trouble with otherwise, since it has no weaknesses. So I kind of understand that. However, when it mega evolves, it emphasizes one of those gems to the extent that you would be crazy to not assume that is part rock. Like, nope, it keeps its ghost dark typing. I don't know. That screams rock type to me, but whatever. And then Spiritomb of the three probably has the best case for not being a rock type, since the Pokemon itself is the spirits living inside of the keystone. But it's still just like with Florges, the odd keystone is still really, when it's all said and done, is a part of the Pokemon. So it also kind of takes away from Sableye being this Pokemon that has no weaknesses. Of Spiritomb is, as far as Gen 4 is concerned, just a better version of it. Luckily, in Gen 5, Sableye was given Prankster, so at least gains some more utility there. But Spiritomb, I think you probably should have been part rock. And then Starmie, it's it has that gem in the very center of its design, which to me screams rock type. I like its psychic water typing. However, there was at least one other psychic water type in that region. So then again, there were a bunch of other at least two other water rock types in the region. So I don't like No, maybe even no, it will evolve by water stones. Maybe not psychic rock, but I don't know. I think it could have been cool for it to be a rock type. Samurott, however, kind of it needed something. Um, it's one of those things where if you're gonna give Imbor a secondary type, you should probably give all three secondary types in the same way that Sceptile didn't have a secondary type. Another one I left off of the Dragon one since it has a mega form that is Dragon. Um, but it's weird that base Sceptile never had a secondary type in the first place. But Samurott, in a similar way that like Dreadnought and Omastar and a couple of other, rock types that the only reason they're rock type is because they have this like shell armor on. I think it would make just as much sense for Samurott to be part rock. And then Conkeldurr literally holding two giant like concrete slabs. Um, it learns Rock Throw and I think Rock Slide and Stone Edge by level up, or I know at least Rock Throw. So I think it would make complete sense. Actually, especially since it would mark, I believe, the only time a Pokemon would gain the rock typing when it evolved. So I think that would have been cool. I also kind of considered putting Girder in with the other steel ones, but because it didn't learn any steel moves by level up, whereas Conkeldurr learned rock moves by level up, I think of the three, Conkeldurr most deserves to have a secondary type. Next, not psychic, we have Oscar the Psychic, which, fun fact, I named this one off of, I kind of wanted his name to be like kind of reference to a like phony wizard character from fiction, and apparently the Wizard of Oz, his real name is Oscar. So there you go, Oscar. Um, this one is full of a bunch of ones that I think almost every human who has played Pokemon at some point has confused most of these for a different type. Golduck and Venomoth. It is crazy to me that at least Golduck, but also Venomoth, is crazy to me that they are not Psychic type. There are a lot of different Pokedex entries for both Psyduck and Golduck about them, having to suppress their psychic ability. At least in later generations, they learn a bunch of psychic moves. Every single human on the planet who has played Pokemon at some point assumed it were psychic, and it's not. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know why it's not, but it's not. And then Venomoth, because it was on Sabrina's team in Red and Blue, even though it's not a psychic type, people just kind of assumed it were psychic. It learns a good amount of other psychic moves, so it makes sense that it's psychic. I mean, why would Sabrina have a Venomoth on her team if it's not psychic type? There's plenty of other psychic types she could have pulled from. She didn't have a Hypno, she didn't have a Slowbro, she didn't have an Exeggutor or a Jinx, but she had Venomoth, so must be psychic, but it's not. Um, Gorbis is definitely one of those that I think would have benefited from having a secondary type if for no other reason than just to make it worth it to get this Pokemon. Because you go through this whole ordeal to find the scanner and then to trade it with Mr. Stern uh, to get the evolutionary item for Huntail and Gorbis, and then you finally have to catch a Clamperl and trade it with that item and then hope the friend you traded with trades it back just to get a Gorbis who ultimately is kind of terrible. Like, go through all of that, and you can't even get one until after the seventh gym, and it's not a great Pokemon. I think having a secondary type would have at least helped it. So, and because it's pink and it learns a couple of psychic moves, I think that, might as well make it a psychic type. Politoed is here because I think it'd be kind of fun if well, the ones like that Poliwhirl could evolve either into the more aggressive physical fighting water type or, the more jovial, more like carefree water psychic type. I think that could be fun. Plus, you can maybe lean more into it using hypnosis and actually getting stabbed from Dream Eater. I think that's cool. Dustox in a very similar way to Venomoth. It learns a lot of psychic moves by level up, and if for no other reason than just to help differentiate it from Beautifly, I think it would have been kind of cool to have it actually evolve into a poison psychic type and just drop the bug type entirely. I don't know. I think then maybe it would be on a list of ones that maybe could be a bug type, but I don't know that psychic poison typing hadn't been done to that point. I mean, it's been done like once, maybe twice. Um, I'm sure there's others outside of Monkey Door, but I can't think of them right now. But um, it's not a very common type, whereas bug, poison, even at that point, you already had Ariados and Venomoth, and maybe even a couple others I can't think of right now. So yeah, I think giving it the psychic type, even just bug psychic, would have been pretty novel for that point. And then Lucario, outside of the two spikes on its hands and its chest, nothing else about the Pokemon screams steel to me. Whereas its aura and like kind of mind-ish reading ability that it has, and like all of that does feel like psychic ability to me. So if you change it to a fighting psychic type, I think nothing about it outside of those spikes would really need to change. Next up, not dark. We have Terry, the not so terrifying, not dark type trainer. Mawile. Whereas Sableye, I think his gimmick actually works very well for him. He's a pretty weak Pokemon you get early on that has no weaknesses, so it actually can be somewhat useful throughout the rest of the game. Mawile, if you're playing through Ruby, doesn't really have a lot going for it. It is a pure steel type, but in Gen 3, it can't learn any steel moves. Um, the only steel moves that existed back then were like a couple of signature moves, Metal Claw, Iron Tail, and it doesn't have a tail and it doesn't have claws. So it's not you're not gonna have it learn Meteor Mash. So there were no steel type moves for it to learn. Yet it learned a bunch of dark moves. It learned Bite, Crunch, Feint Attack, Fake Tears. Like you would think that just looking at it and also looking at its moveset, you would assume it's dark type, but instead pure steel. So by the time you get to the third gym, it's already a little obsolete because it has a really low base stat total. All of its best moves are using its worst attacking stat. It's just at least regular Mawile in Gen 3 is not a great Pokemon. It got a little better in the next gen when Crunch became physical, when it could learn Iron Head, and obviously got a lot better when it Mega evolved. But going off that, even though I feel it should be dark type, they kind of did the opposite when they had the chance to make it a dual type and made it part fairy, which is literally the opposite of dark. I mean, fairy steel is one of the best defensive typings, or one of the best actually typings in general in the entire franchise. So it's good to give it that, but also nothing about its design and moveset or anything about it up to that point screamed fairy to me. So I don't know, it feels a little random, but it's good that it finally did get some use. And here's where I have Midnight Lycanroc. As mentioned before, I think fighting could also work with it, but dark works even better with it, at least design-wise. You literally have to evolve it at night. Just its design screams dark to me. Instead, all three Lycanrocs are pure rock. I think it would have been cool if regular Lycanroc, or I guess Lycanroc day form, were either fairy or normal. We haven't had a rock normal type yet, so I think it would have been cool if it were rock normal, and then this were rock dark, and then the dusk form was rock fighting. I think that would have been neat. Huntail, just like with Gorbis from the one before, really could have benefited from the dark typing. It learns a good amount of dark moves by level up. Um, I know it would be kind of fighting for the same spot as Sharpedo, who is much easier to get, but I still think that's better than having to compete with a lot of other pure water types, which there are so many in Generation 3, or even just other water types in general. So at least having it be part dark could help it do something that's, at least a little more unique. Glalie is another one that learns a lot of good dark moves by level up and also could kind of work as a counterpart to Frostlass, who is part ghost, and then Glalie being part dark. That could be cool. Also, it's leaning into the more like black aesthetic, also kind of, screams dark to me. So Arbok, it's weird to me that in Generation 2 they added two new types, but they only had one of those types be added to a previous gen Pokemon, but not the other one. Magnemite gained the Steel type, but no Pokemon gained the Dark type. And I'm not the first to say this, but I do genuinely think it would have made perfect sense for Arbok to be the one to gain the Dark typing. Um, Poison Dark is a really good typing. Even to this day, it only has the one weakness um, with Ground. But Arbok is so relatively weak that I really don't think it would be a huge problem for it to get the secondary typing. And then finally, Luxray. It's one of the biggest, memes in all of Pokemon that Luxray looks like that, learns a bunch of dark moves, but is not a dark type. And then you will have people try to argue that, oh, its Pokedex entry says that it actually uses the entire light spectrum to like see through walls and stuff, and is actually really friendly with people. So it'd be weird if it were a dark type. Okay, well, first of all, there are dark type Pokemon that are said to be friendly. There are um, there are other Pokedex entries that don't really mesh super well with certain typings here and there. Or you could just have the Pokedex entries not say that, or have it be this misunderstood beast, kind of like Absol, where like, you know, people, kind of find it scary, even though it actually wants to be friends with people. And that's, kind of why it's a dark type. I don't know. I think there's a lot of ways you can make it work. If your only reason why it shouldn't be dark is that the Pokedex says something, then I feel, a kind of bad argument because you could just have the Pokedex say something else. Just design it in a way where the Pokedex could say something else. But this is once again another pure electric type that really, really should have been another type. Next, we have not fairy. We have Anastasia, the fairy girl. And first, we have Blissey, one of the Pokemon from a previous generation that I am genuinely shocked wasn't turned into a fairy. Um, if you were to show me Blissey and Wigglytuff next to each other and said one of these was a fairy type, all of my money would have gone into Blissey. It has a little fairy wings. It is pink like other fairy types are. Has the abilities that a lot of fairy types have. It just feels more like a fairy type, but instead they give it to some other stuff, which is it's cool, but I don't think Blissey. I don't know if Blissey gaining or changing to the fairy type would have like broken the game necessarily. I know it, if anything, it actually would have gained more weaknesses because currently it's only weak to fighting. If it either gained or turned into a fairy type, it would have now been weak to steel and poison. So those aren't the most common types, but they at least has more weaknesses than just fighting now. So I don't know. I think it seemed to be a prime candidate for Fairy, but there was clearly something about it that made them choose against it. But oh well. Um, Alola Mola. Uh, this one is here mostly just to kind of help differentiate it from Love Disc. I could either see Love Disc or Alola Mola here, one or the other. One of them should have been Fairy. I don't really care which one. I just put Alola Mola just because I feel it's technically more useful. And Love Disc is so weak that gaining the fairy type wouldn't have helped it at all. So you might as well give it to the better one. Um, but yes, if they're, I don't know, one or both of them should have gotten the fairy type. Same with Delcatty, kind of in a similar vein to Love Disc. It is an incredibly weak Pokemon, so I don't really think that getting the fairy type would have helped it. But maybe some niche here and there it could slot in. I'm not exactly sure where, since it is so bad of a Pokemon. But I don't know. It it could have it would have helped it do something, especially in a Alpha Sapphire playthrough where you do catch a Skitty kind of early, you can get a Moonstone relatively early. Having this normal fairy type for the early to mid game could be useful, assuming you for some reason didn't get a Gardevoir or a Azumarill who are infinitely better in every single way, but it would have helped Delcatty a little bit. Now, Lilligant, between Lilligant and Whimsicott, I honestly feel like Lilligant feels more like a better candidate for Fairy than Whimsicott does. Just something about his vibe just screams more Fairy to me. I don't really know exactly why. Um, but yeah, I'm okay with Whimsicott being Fairy, but Lilligant to me also feels like it maybe should be a Fairy type. Um, Milotic, another one that uh I don't necessarily like fully agree that Milotic should be a fairy type. Kind of like with Electivire, where I didn't like fully agree that it should be fighting. But there's a bunch of different fan games and a bunch of different opinions online that people think it should be fairy, or if it got a mega, that mega would be fairy. And I definitely agree with that. If it does eventually for some reason it hasn't yet. If it does eventually get a mega, that mega probably should be a fairy type. But I'm not gonna say it. People are wrong for thinking it could be a fairy type. And lastly, we have Mega Absol. Um, Something about its wings and just the other design elements they added onto it scream fairy type to me. I think it would have also just kind of helped it a little bit to gain this secondary typing. It's not necessary, but um also it getting the magic bounce ability, which the only other Pokemon that get magic bounce are psychic and fairy types. I think it getting the fairy typing just felt like an obvious choice to me, but oh well. Okay, and lastly, I have two different teams that are just kind of miscellaneous other Pokemon I saw that looked like they could be other types, but couldn't quite fit onto any of these teams or couldn't quite make full teams of six for the types in question. So I made two more teams full of Pokemon that don't necessarily all fit the same type, but I wanted to mention. So first we have Miss Lane, the first of the miscellaneous ones here. And yes, I did make her a reporter since, Lois Lane, Miss Lane, yeah. So we have Lurantis, who looks like it should be a bug type. I understand is doing the whole mimicry thing, so it's literally trying to look like a bug type on purpose, but if for no other reason than just to differentiate it from the much better Saurina, who's in the same generation, who is also pure grass, I think Lurantis could have benefited from being grass and bug. Weavile is here more so because not really because I feel like it should be another type necessarily, more so just because I really don't understand why it is ice type. I was okay with Sneasel being Ice Dark just because that was a unique typing. There weren't a lot of other ice types in the region. I don't know, just something about it makes a little more sense for the type to me. But then when you get to Weavile, I was really hoping that they would emphasize the ice typing a little more, like have its claws be covered in ice, give it like a scarf, just do something to it to make it look more icy. And instead it's just a kind of bigger Sneasel with like more going on. And I like Weavile's design. I just really wish they showed why it's ice type. And instead they just kind of don't. So yeah. I don't know what other type it maybe should have been, like maybe pure dark or maybe fighting. Um, Although Hisui and Sneasel is and then Sneasel are part fighting, so maybe that's where I'm getting that from. But I don't know. If anyone has any suggestions for what type you would make Weavile or how you would change its design to make it more ice type, let me know. Gliscor is one that I considered to put on the dark one, but I had so many other good ideas that I ended up just putting it here. Also, I do genuinely think it maybe should be a dark type, but also I think poison works very well for it. And I understand why they didn't make it a flying dark type in Gen 4 since they also had Honchkrow, who was also an evolution of a previous gen Pokemon who was dark flying. So I understand why they didn't make it, dark flying, but Gliscor especially just doesn't really feel like a ground type at all anymore to me. Like I don't really know if like adding the poison type would really work on it. I mean, they clearly realized that it should be, it should have some relationship to poison since Gligar has the immunity ability and Gliscor has the poison heal ability, but also just, as a concept, a scorpion vampire, just those two things together really scream poisonous to me. But whatever. Palkia, this is one of those where I'm not exactly sure why it is water type. Is it because pearls are associated with clams or oysters who are in the water and is that the end of it? Is there something about like the way it's designed or I don't really know anything. I couldn't really find anything in its Pokedex entries that like mention water. Like I could see Dialga being water because it moves through with the flow of time that, kind of signifies water to me. But Palkia, not so much. Um, if anything, I feel like, again, I'm kind of stereotyping based on the color here, but I wouldn't be surprised if people looked at it and because it is pink and because there are other psychic types that emphasize this gym as their power source with Starmie and Grumpig, for example. I would think some people might think it's Psychic type, but instead it's Dragon Water. So I don't know. Uh, yeah, I'm not really sure exactly about that one, but it's one that I've always felt a little weird about it being water type. Xurkitree, um, this one is absolutely baffling to me. And I know I've mentioned before that I understand completely that the Ultra Beasts aren't supposed to make sense. That's kind of their whole thing. But at least every other Ultra Beast has a dual typing. And they do something very interesting with both those typings. Whereas Xurkitree is the only pure type Ultra Beast, and guess what? They, for some reason, make it a pure electric type. They just couldn't help themselves. In the same generation where Zeraora comes from, they also made Xurkitree. Even though tree is literally in the name, it can learn a couple of grass moves. I think grass could have worked well. It literally looks like it has copper wires coming out of its arms. Steel could have worked well. It's all black. Dark type could have worked well. It's another instance um where it could have been the first electric dark type. Same with Zeraora. Like, nope, it's just pure electric. What is it with Game Freak and making things pure electric that really could benefit from a second type? I don't know. If there was one other Ultra Beast outside of kind of Poipole that that was a single type, I'd be a little more forgiving. But since it is the only pure type, I guess kind of also Necrozma, but that's a whole thing. Um, like as far as like the ones you meet, the standard Ultra Beast, it is the only one that is a pure type. And that's weird to me, but whatever. And then lastly on this team, you have Suicune. It's weird that Suicune's not an ice type. The other two legendary beasts are types of the of of a Zapdos and Moltres, and then it literally has like a big what looks like a big ice crystal on its head, It learns a lot of ice moves, but instead of completing the fire electric ice, trio there, they made him water type. I don't know. It's a little weird. Um, like it's not like the most egregious thing ever. It's just a little weird. And I guess you could argue it's because lore-wise, it's heavily implied that it's like a reincarnated version of a Vaporeon, but they didn't. I almost guarantee they did not have a like specific thing in mind of like, oh yeah, it was actually the evolutions that were resurrected. Like I really don't know they were that specific when making that up. If they just happened to have the same types as the evolutions. So maybe they did, but I feel they would have confirmed that by now since those games are like 25 years old plus even. But yeah, oh well. And lastly, we have Monty with this motley crew of other, Pokemon that I think could be other types. Superior. Um, this is one that I kind of considered putting on one of the dragon teams. Um, I eventually decided against it, but also I could easily hear an argument for it being a dragon type, especially since I also did end up putting Samurott on one of these teams. If we have Imbor and Samurott have a secondary type, I wouldn't want to leave Superior out. So Superior should probably be some other secondary type. Mesprit, I guarantee if Fairy were in the Gen 4 games, I all but guarantee Mesprit as of Fenuxi would have been part Fairy, at least part Fairy. Um, so this is one of those instances where all three could be here, but Mesprit is the one I chose since I feel it looks the most fairy. I also think they almost certainly would have all three been different types. Maybe it's just due to their colorations, they would have been another electric, fire, and either ice or water type trio, and then have either the psychic or fairy type on them. Um, or maybe they're just all psychic fairy. Regardless, I really think that Mesprit specifically looks the most like a fairy type, but all three probably would be fairy type. Darkrai, a lot of people even to this day kind of mistake it for being a ghost type, and I completely understand why. It learns a good amount of ghost moves by level up and TM. Just, shadows can emphasize both dark and ghost, so it being a ghost type makes sense. Solgaleo and Koraidon are both members of the kind of, not small group of box legendaries that I genuinely am surprised that they are not fire types. I at one point had Groudon here, but because Groudon does have the primal reversion form of Primal Groudon, which does fix it to being part fire, I decided to leave it off here, but I wanted to mention it here since this is now the third time that we've had a box legend that really looks like it probably should be a fire type. Because Slogoleo is supposed to represent the sun. It learns some good fire moves by level up in TM. I I don't really know why it's a steel type, especially since it being a steel psychic type with full metal body, which is just a reskin of clear body. They just made Metagross again. It's a little better Metagross, but still, it's very, very similar to Metagross. And that's always been a little weird to me. Um, like at least with if it were Psychic Fire, it would have been a cool physical Psychic Fire type. We hadn't gotten that yet, I'm pretty sure up to that point. So yeah, because both Delphox and Zenmo Duranitan were both special attackers. So that would have at least made it pretty unique, but instead it's steel type. And I don't really understand why. So yeah. And then Koraidon, just like with Groudon, Koraidon literally has an ability that sets up the sun, but then doesn't have a stab typing to utilize it. What makes it even weirder is that its counterpart Miraidon does have a type that that is enhanced by its ability. It has an ability that sets up the electric terrain and then it is an electric type to get benefit from it. And not only that, Miraidon has the same typing as a different box legendary, the one from Gen 5. And what's even weirder about that is that the other box legendary in Gen 5 is Fire Dragon, the type that Koraidon should have been. So what I'm saying is that either you just commit and have both Miraidon and Koraidon both be the same type as the box legends from Gen 5, or you have them both be different typings. Maybe Koraidon fighting fighting dragon and have Miraidon be either psychic dragon or steel dragon or something like that. Uh, because as it is right now, it just really feels unfair to have one have an actual benefit from its ability and the other not benefit as much to the point where um every single Koraidon I see on Pokemon Showdown has its Terra type be fire to actually get that benefit from the sun. I don't, that'll always annoy me. And lastly, we have Xerneas. Xerneas, who literally takes the form of a tree when it's in its stasis form. Um, I feel like, life energy and like plants and that kind of thing go hand in hand. It does learn some grass moves. I feel like grass just would really work on this thing very well, especially since Yveltal is flying dark, and then Xerneas is just pure fairy. I think it would have been very cool if Xerneas were fairy grass, so that way both Xerneas and Yveltal would both be able to hit each other on some typing super effectively, flying into grass, fairy into dark. Because as it is right now, Xerneas has the clear advantage. So I think it would have been cool to kind of, not let which actually, now that I think about it, Evoltal is another one that, in the same way that Koraidon and Groudon are both, their typings don't like quite make use of their ability the best they can. Xerneas's ability has it where all of its fairy moves are boosted by its ability, and then Evoltal, its signature move Oblivion Wing is a flying move, but its signature ability, um, increases the damage of dark moves. So it also can't like quite take as much advantage of its ability as it should. That no, just the fun little thing they do every now and then for the games that I pick. It's fun. Anyway, but regardless, I do really think that Xerneas just I think it would have made a lot of sense for Xerneas to be a grass type. Okay. Thank you so much for watching towards the end here. I really appreciate all of you for watching. Please let me know down below what you thought of any or all of these teams. Are there any Pokemon that I missed? Are there any complete types that you could make teams of? Um, are there, you know, are there any Pokemon that you feel you disagree with the typings that I changed or whatever? Are there any just any of your thoughts down below? I'd like to hear them. Like have a discussion about stuff like this. And like I said up front, um if I hear enough suggestions for other Pokemon that should be other types, I could maybe even make a whole, sequel video to this if you want it. So yeah, leave all your thoughts down below. And with that, I will see you all next time.